Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from deep inside the heart of the future Liberty State. Brought to you once again by On Fire Ministries, in the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news, where it's not about right or left, it's about right and wrong. It's about our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ. About not ending in prayer, but moving to action. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Father, deliver us from the evil one.
Welcome to Patriot Radio.
Welcome, fellow patriots, to Patriot Radio. Today, the leader of Hamas is dead. Van Miller is innocent, and Kamala Harris crashes and burns live on Fox News. Well, maybe not live because it was a recorded interview because she didn't want it. Anyway, she messed it up totally, and look forward to talking about this here in just a little bit. Also, our guests today, Matt Geiger of Verity Metals and Joel Skousen of World Affairs Brief, to prepare you for the election and beyond. Here at Patriot Radio, we want you to get the best news, the most accurate news first, so you can prepare your family for the times that are ahead, and in fact, the times that are already upon us. Remember, though, no fear, we were made for this. So we're going to start with our guest today, Matt Geiger of Verity Metals. Now, he's one of the few people that I've met, and I've wanted to have him on for a long time to talk about this, that understands sound money, but not just in a heady way or an educational way. He understands sound money in a very practical way regarding your retirement accounts. He handles 401ks and IRA accounts, transferring them into physical gold that you can actually go physically see. What a novel concept that is. Matt Geiger, it is great to have you on Patriot Radio today. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, you too, Matt. Love your show. I got put onto you by Vlad, and you run a great show. I love the stuff you talk about. There's so many people out there. I think your content's great. And, certainly the audience, I love, conservatives, people that understand what's really going on, God-fearing Christians. This is my territory. These are my people.
Well, and I think it's not just us that's waking up to sound money. I've been talking about this for quite a while. I introduced quite a bit of legislation regarding sound money when I was in the legislature, but you've understood this probably longer than I have. What is the backing of gold in just, it's not just an idea, but there's something behind it that people really gravitate to. And it seems like it's always the champion. I mean, we're seeing gold skyrocket right now again. Why is that? Explain it to us.
Yeah, gold is it's a store of value. So gold is not one of those assets that you're looking for. It's not like a stock where you get a rate of return. It's like, okay, let's say at the beginning of the year, you bought gold at 2,000 and we're sitting here today at 2,700. It's not like you've made a $700 gain. It's really that what's happening is they're starting to admit the loss of value of the dollar, right? And that's going to continue to be a trend. We talk about, BRICS nations. Well, what's the relevance of BRICS? It's very simple, is that all these countries that have been traditionally sitting on US dollars as their reserve currency for, decades, now they're uprooting those dollars and moving to the Chinese-backed yuan, right? It's gold-backed currency. Well, those dollars are not going to just disappear. What's going to happen is those dollars are now going to flow back to the United States. And if you think inflation's bad now, just wait till those dollars start. It's warfare. It's literally, this is not, we're not flying over, Berlin and dropping bombs anymore. Now what we do is we send dollars back to the country. The idiots in America, they send these dollars back to us and they just inflate the crap out of our system. So I would expect that to continue to create loss of value in the dollar and continue to push gold and silver prices higher.
Well, speaking of inflation, people are going to the grocery store today. They're seeing like 50% more on food, goods they're buying at the grocery store. Everybody kind of understands that something is out of whack, right? But I don't think that people really truly understand what inflation actually is and why gold is so stable in inflationary periods. So if you can explain that in simple terms.
Well, gold should really move as a result of inflation, right? Inflation is a result of an interest rate-based system, right? So when Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, what that did was it moved us into this fiat currency, this money backed by nothing. And then what started happening? Everything started to increase in price. Maybe the first thing you would have noticed at that time is, okay, maybe my house is worth a little bit more. boom, next thing you know, maybe you're getting paid a little bit more per year. But now, instead of that movie ticket costing, $1.25 to get in, now that movie ticket's $5. So everything really inflated along with it. And I think where we're at is we're at the end of that system where if you inflate anymore, if you create any more debt, there's nowhere to go. It's like they've run out of road. There's nowhere else to push this thing. And that's why they wanted to bring in, the digital currency, because it was their way of, moving us out of this completely disastrous system into another disastrous system. And they thought they would get away with it. But fortunately, we had a guy by the name of Donald Trump run in 2016 and threw a total wrench in those plans. So I think we're going to head for a period of chaos. And then from chaos comes order. It's just going to be a question of who brings order.
Exactly. And we saw the horrendous interview yesterday with Kamala Harris. She just crashed and burned on Fox News. It was incredible. And she would not own the last 3.5 years. I mean, that was just clear through the whole interview. She wouldn't own it. And he was bringing up, rightfully so, many people are stressed with inflation right now. Are your policies going to change? And she wouldn't own it. I think that this brings up a couple of questions. The first is, if there's another continuation of the Obama administration, let's be real, there's going to be more inflation. And so gold is going to be good that way. But if Trump gets in, gold will also be good as well, won't it?
I think gold will be great either way. I think the way the deep state works, right, because that's who we're talking about right now, is it's the deep state. They operate with problem, reaction, solution. So no matter what, we're going to go through problem, then they're going to get the desired reaction, and then there's going to be a solution. So who's going to bring that solution? My money's on Trump. I think they're going to try to introduce the CBDC, this digital prison nonsense. No one's going to want it. No one's going to want anything to do with it. And then what? Then you're at a stalemate. I think Trump has something ready to go. To my understanding, from what I hear, we'll have money backed by a basket of precious metals, so gold, silver, and we'll probably have another U.S. dollar backed by oil. That's from what I hear from my sources.
Yeah, something that is tangible. Also, I'm hearing, cryptocurrency has been discussing this. I know there's a couple cryptocurrencies out there right now that are backed by gold. It is so fascinating because 30 years ago it was, well, gold's not very portable. We can't really use it. It's too cumbersome. But now in the digital age, that actually really isn't so, is it?
No, I mean, I think the concept of cryptocurrencies are great. I'm very cautious with them. So, for example, Bitcoin. I mean, look at the backstory on Bitcoin. Some Japanese guy that no one's ever heard of, right? He just, no one's ever seen him. No one's ever seen his face. He just so happened to create this amazing technology, and he had this 800,000 Bitcoin that he just decided to give away because he wanted to make the world a better place. I mean, give me a break. To my understanding, Bitcoin is a creation of DARPA, Defense Advanced Resources Projects Agency, just like Facebook, just like probably Amazon. These are deep state created assets that were probably meant to move us into a digital age and do it organically on our own, right? I'm very distrusting of Bitcoin. I'm very distrusting of most cryptocurrencies, although I do think in the future what you'll have is you'll have a gold and silver backed set of money, but then you'll have a digital interface over it, a blockchain that will keep everybody in check. That I could see, ease of access. That makes it so, when people ask me, I get a lot of calls, Matt, what am I going to do with my gold and silver? Am I going to go down to the store and pay with it? It's like, no, you're going to still, tap your debit card or tap your credit card. That'll still exist. It's just, you need to have real, sometimes the old way is the better way. And you need to have something tangible behind that money so that, let's say the digital system gets corrupted. Okay, well, we have a physical ledger as well. We don't just have the digital ledger, we've got the physical.
I think that's very important. The digital interface is really the breakthrough that we needed. 30 years ago, not portable. Now, the digital interface, you can have physical gold that you could go down and see if you wanted to, which brings up just a side note right now. I remember in the legislature, we asked about Fort Knox. Where's the gold in Fort Knox? Do we actually still have it, right? And nobody could answer the question. It's very strange. But you operate in a way. What's that? Oh, yeah, go ahead. Then answer it. Yeah.
So it was revealed, if you watch an interview, go to the Gateway Pundit website and type in the search section, Jan Halper Hayes, and you'll see an interview that she did in August of 23. And she explained how, she worked under Trump, and she explained how in 2018, Trump visited the Pope at the Vatican, and he sent in 650 cargo planes to take back the United States gold that was sitting there. So yes, there was no gold in Fort Knox. It's been looted. It's been given out to other countries. But Trump took it back during his presidency, and no one ever talked about it.
So naturally, the question is going to be, if we have a digital interface, But how do I actually know that my gold is in a repository somewhere? So that is a legitimate question, but there's actually a very clear solution to that.
Yeah, that's why you want to have the physical gold, because at the end of the day, you know exactly what you have. I think the system would need to be implemented, developed. People are going to have to trust that system in order for it to work. Sure, there's companies right now that will say, oh, our cryptocurrency is backed by gold, but you really don't know that. You're really still buying into a company. You have no idea what this company is up to. Hopefully they're good. Hopefully they have the gold and silver, but it could just be another deep state scam. Who the hell knows? That's why what I do is sending, physical gold, physical silver, FedEx right to your doorstep. You don't own it unless you hold it. And that's my position on it.
So how about people with retirement accounts? Because they can't physically, personally anyway, have their own gold and silver if they transfer their retirement account over to gold and silver. So explain how that whole process works.
My favorite question, and it's probably the biggest selling point of my company. I've been in the gold business about a decade. I've worked at several gold companies, and what they require is they require you to use, maybe 2 or 3 depositories throughout the country. I don't know these guys. I've never been to their facilities. Usually people are paying, $200 a year. That covers the storage, and it goes to some vault, right? At those vaults, your stuff's just commingled with everybody else's.
Right.
What I do to kind of change the game, when I opened up Verity Metals, the way I kind of changed this, the way this works is I'll let you choose where you want to store your gold and silver, right? There's ways where you can store it in a place of your choosing. Let's say you have it, like I'm here in Arizona, I'm here in Glendale. There's a depository over in a place called Cave Creek over here. If you lived in Arizona, why don't I just go help you put your stuff over in the depository at Cave Creek? So if things hit the fan, you have access to it, right? If things really start to break down, you can go there and take your stuff with you. Now, with an IRA, you're not supposed to, because of course that would look like a distribution. But hey, if the world's crumbling around you, wouldn't it be kind of nice to have access to your gold and silver in your IRA? That's what I do for people.
So all over the country, not just in Arizona.
Correct. So what I do is, if it's a place maybe I haven't worked in, I'll go investigate different depositories that are local, different holding facilities. They're all over the place. We can find a depository for you. Then, maybe what I'll tell the client is, hey, go down there, go inspect it. Go see if you're comfortable with this facility, right? And we'll actually do some research for you, and we'll investigate facilities that are close by to you throughout the country. We'll look at that stuff and say, hey, here's a place where you could potentially go. And I have some go-tos, some, relationships in different depositories in different states that I use on a consistent basis that I like, where a client could go down there and physically go see their stuff if they really wanted to. Whereas you work with any other gold company, you don't see your gold and silver. It's just supposedly sent to this depository. Who the heck knows what happens to it from there?
So one of the biggest questions that I've had recently, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, is people have asked me, hey, Matt, what do I do with my future? What do I do with my investments? Things just, they seem really unstable right now, uncertain right now. What do I do with them? And so I have not really had a good answer until we talked the other day, because I actually met somebody who understood how this should work. And I also asked you a question, and I want you to just repeat the answer to everybody out there. Most people will say, well, you can do collectibles. When you buy gold and silver, you can buy collectible type coins. And I'm like, yeah, I would stay away from that. I would actually do something a little different. What do you think the answer is?
Yeah, generally, what a lot of gold companies will like to sell is they'll like to sell like certified coins, stuff in, comes in a little square case. It's done by PCGS or NGC. And they're fun. Look, if you want to go buy a one-off because you like the coin, it interests you, maybe you put it on display in the living room so people can see it. Sure. One-off, fine. You like the thing, that's one thing. But for investment purposes, really what you want is you just want a straight up piece of gold, piece of silver. I generally recommend US minted coinage. Why? Because it's constitutional. It already has laws surrounding it that consider it legal tender. There's all kinds of tax advantages that are associated with the American Eagle program. And if we go back to constitutional money, you're sitting in gold or silver eagles, you're plugged right into a constitutional money system. So what I try to do is I try to set people up for success so that when this gold and silver does start to become relevant again and being used as money, you're already sitting pretty. You made the right decision the day you bought the gold and silver.
It's a double insurance policy, basically. I love that. People have a little bit of money to invest. Maybe they have a retirement account. They don't trust the stock market. They don't trust brokers. They want to do something that's is stable and a little more certain based on a godly money system of gold and silver. How can they do that through Verity Metals?
Yeah, I would just look at it as like what you're really doing is you're just bridging your money from this system into the new system. We don't know what's going to happen in the stock market. My suspicion is that it's got to come down. The
Me
dollar,
too.
the US dollar that we're all operating in, it's got to come down. And the very banks that we bank in financial institutions, they've got to come down. We're getting rid of the deep state, right? And that's going to come at a price. So if that's the case, you just need something to bridge your money from this system into the new system. I don't know what that new system is going to look like. We could probably have a whole episode just based on what our thoughts are on that. But what I would just say what gold and silver really represent is it just represents a way of getting your money out of the system securely and into the new one. And in that in-between period, that's where, storable food, keeping enough medications on hand. If you have pets, make sure you get enough. It's going to be tough getting goods and services during that period of time.
So right now, people can go to veritymetals.com. They can go where, do what next? What are the next action steps for most folks?
Yeah, you could go on there. You could just call, you can even call me straight away. Just say, hey, want to talk to Matt? I usually answer, I answer all my own phone calls. But yeah, you can go on my website. You can set up an appointment there, right? If there's a specific time of day that you want to sit down and talk, and let's chat. Let's meet. Let's have a meeting of the minds and see where it takes us. And usually, what I'll do is I'll make sense of somebody's financial situation, and I'll say, hey, here's a way of doing things. Tell me what you think.
So, just what is your sense the next 60 days? What do you think is going to happen?
I think there's going to be no certification of the election. I think that what's going to happen is you're going to have pockets in the country where the election's going to be uncertifiable. That's going to create outrage in people. And I think what that'll do is that'll start moving us toward reestablishing our elections in this country because it's all a sham. You have to solve there's no 2024 unless you solve 2020.
Exactly. Yeah. And I remember asking the question, can we audit the code? No, you can't look inside. Well, why would you not let an audit happen of the code? Why wouldn't you let an audit happen of how the votes were actually counted? Why would you not do a hand count to verify the machines were correct? Why would you not allow people to see whether they're connected to the internet? I mean, just on and on and on and on. There was no good reason ever given, and I think Americans are waking up to that.
Yeah, well, and even if you want to do those things, well, you can go join Tina Peters in her prison cell.
Right, yeah. She should be the first one pardoned, or one of the first people pardoned. Amen.
Yeah, what she is she's being made an example out of. If you want to question elections and question us, we're going to put you in jail.
Yeah, and that's just it's self-censorship. They want us to self-censor, which is the worst form of tyranny.
The worst. Thank you for having me, and I'll see you soon.
VerityMetals.com. And now our next guest today is going to be Joel Skousen. We're going to get him on here in just a couple of minutes. But I want to take a moment and go through our Bible teaching, which is in 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 13 and 14. Be on the alert, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. All that you do must be done in love. That is an admonishment for all of us today, that not only men, but women need to be alert. We need to stand firm in our faith, not let it be shaken by all of the talking heads and all of the circumstances around us. So we need to be strong in this time for our fellow Americans, because our feet are firmly planted on the rock, Jesus Christ. And if our feet are firmly planted on the rock, Jesus Christ, when the storm comes, nothing will fall. So tonight, as you are praying together as a family, take a moment. Pray this prayer. Lord, keep me on the alert. Keep me firm in my faith in you. Help me to act like a son or a daughter in your kingdom. Keep me strong. And Lord, may I do everything for your glory and honor and praise in love. In Jesus' name, amen. And that brings us now to our guest today, Joel Skousen of World Affairs Brief, worldaffairsbrief.com. Joel, it's always great to have you on Patriot Radio. How are you doing, my friend?
Well, thank you very much. I'm doing all right, as well as you can do with the deteriorating situation in the world.
Yes, and we are it seems like every week we're living a decade. We really are. I would like just take a few moments. What do you think is going to happen in the next 60 days? What do you think Americans should be prepared for?
Well, I'm not at all as optimistic as Matt Geiger, who you just spoke to. I don't think there's ever going to be constitutional money again. There's just, taxation is very, very unpopular. You can't cut spending because we have a corrupted majority who will vote if you try to take away the benefits. Even Trump could not cut spending. And so you have to inflate the currency, and the Fed provides that. You can't inflate the currency if you've got a gold-backed currency. And I'm not just talking about gold backing, because you can still inflate with that. But if you have gold or silver redeemable currency, meaning you can trade it in, that's what happened prior to 1971. The French wanted the gold. They were inflating before 1971. Matt is wrong about that. They did not stop them from inflating, but what caused the problem of disavowing the gold standard is that people caught on, or France and all the other nations caught on and said, we'll take the gold rather than the fiat currency. And so they had to go off the gold standard, and they're never coming back. Just like we're never going to have indexing for inflation. Your house price may rise and other things, your income may rise. You pay increased taxes on those increases, but you really don't have an increase. You're just paying for the inflation that the government causes. Your house isn't increasing in value. The money is simply devaluating. And that happened under Trump. And by the way, I'll tell you, Trump did not repatriate the gold that was missing. That's a disinformation story, a pro-Trump story, but it didn't happen. And the gold is still not there. But my story to conservatives is the fact that you're certainly not going to have a renovation of the country. After 2 assassination attempts, they're not going to let Trump get reelected. I mean, I knew this when you look at the push polling that happened after Kamala was named as the Democratic nominee without any democratic process, and suddenly her numbers were up 4% over Trump. I mean, she was below Biden in terms of approval rating, and suddenly to be 4 points above Trump, this is push polling. This has nothing to do with reality, and they are continuing to push this. I'm covering in tomorrow's World Affairs Brief, for example, that the post office allowed 9 trucks using Postal Service trucks to ship ballots from New York, a non-postal facility, down to Pennsylvania to be counted in the ballots in the wee hours of the morning, and refuses to tell who hired those trucks and who they gave permission to drive those Postal Service's trucks. I mean, that's only a part of the evidence of how they falsified the election in 2020. Not to mention the hacking of the Edison research, which compiles all the information from the states and feeds it to the network. And the hacker found out how many hundreds of thousands of votes had come in for Donald Trump that were either flipped to Biden or not recorded on Trump's ledger. How are they going to allow Trump, who they tried to kill twice and failed now, to win when they've got election internet-controlled computers that they can change the results and enter programs that give you a certain result at the end and then erase that program so it's undetectable? And you have judges, for example, like in Georgia, refusing to allow the state to purge the voter rolls of illegal aliens. The same thing in Arizona, the same thing in Nevada. And anyone who thinks that the deep state is going to be dismantled by Donald Trump, who does not know his conspiracy theories, and the reason you got to know conspiracy, you've got to know who are the ones who were involved in the cover-up of the JFK assassination, of the 9/11 deep state operation to take down the World Trade Centers with explosives. I mean, I know those things, so I knew that James Comey was deep state before he was, FBI director. I knew that Robert Mueller was deep state and Christopher Wray was deep state because they were both involved in the cover-up of the 9/11 disaster. I knew that Brett Kavanaugh was deep state. Even though he was a conservative jurist, he's deep state because he was number 2 to Ken Starr in the cover-up of the Vince Foster murder. And that's why he and John Roberts, when they get that phone call in the night and have to switch their votes with the liberals on the court, they do so because they're deep state. So conservatives have to wake up here to the very dire situation that we have here. And the deep state controls about, 90% of the higher level judges. They control about 75% of Congress with dirt that they have on them from sexual misdeeds ever since they've been state legislatures on up to Congress. And they just have a tremendous amount of control that is almost impossible to undo. Even, and I'm running for president under the Constitution Party, but even I couldn't drain the swamp because it's not enough to know the general ideas that we have. Most of the deep state information is kept secret under the guise of national security. And if you ask the NSA to get the wiretaps on these deep staters, colluding and agreeing to do these things, they tell you there's nothing there.
Which they would obviously have access to. They would obviously have that.
That's right. And they do have access to it. And so it's very difficult because you take it before judges and they'll throw it out for a technicality. That's what happens when you've allowed the deep state to get so much control over the country.
Now, there's a whole bunch to unpack there. Let's start with the election first. As you know, I worked quite a bit on trying to get some kind of election integrity in Washington state because we've been dealing with this for over a decade and a half with mail-in ballots, etc. And there was always a refusal to audit. There was always a refusal to let us see the source codes, always a refusal to have people with meaningful observation of whether these machines were plugged into the internet when they weren't supposed to be. And we could go on with that. But do you think that there's even going to be an election? Or do you think just Trump will be defeated in the election? Or on the back end, and this is kind of where I'm at right now, that they won't certify the election if Trump does win? Or is it all three?
Well, the Democrats have already said on Axios that they're not going to certify the election if Trump wins, which means that they're hypocrites because they're criticizing the Trump supporters and Trump himself for refusing to or trying to decertify the election or question the certification through Vice President Pence in 2020. And now for them to say that they're not going to certify. But Georgia, a judge just ruled, for example, that the counties have to certify by the date set by law, regardless of whether they find fraud involved in the election. I mean, that is just incredible. And you have judges refusing, using the 90-day before the election rule of the National Voter Act, saying that you can't change the voter rolls 90 days before the election, and refusing to let them purge illegal aliens from the rolls. And even a judge in Georgia told the counties, you have to put back on the rolls anybody you purged for being an illegal alien. I mean, who in their right mind thinks that you're going to win the election and get an election integrity when Democrats, by and large, control the election machinery at almost state and local level in every state, including red states? It's Democrats in the big cities that control the election machinery.
So let's unpack the second part of that, and that is the gold and silver issue. I think Matt was trying to say that inflation began in earnest after the gold standard was officially removed. I think that's where he was going with that. But I do want to say that I appreciate people who believe in physical metals being somewhere that we can actually go see. And if that is able to in some way mitigate what is happening to the average American, we should be all for that. I mean, I've tried the sound money legislation. I know you have been vocal on sound money for a long time. And for a lot of reasons, the whole globalist cabal is never going to try to let that happen. They're actually going to do the opposite with CBDC. How do we do it, though, in local pockets? I mean, I believe in the counties and the states being able to do these kind of things. How can we actually achieve some kind of sound money at a local level, even if it's contractually between two people or it's an IRA or a 401k account being transferred into physical gold?
Well, Utah and Nevada have gold-backed currency, which is a very beautiful piece of currency that has overlaid with actual physical gold. So it has value intrinsic in the currency, which is not just a paper currency. But my criticism of that movement is they're encouraging people to spend that. But you see, that goes against Say's law. Bad money drives out good. And the reason it does is, why spend a beautiful gold-backed Nevada or Utah currency when people will accept fiat currency? You'll always spend. I do that. I keep the gold-backed currency. Matt is absolutely right about, if you don't have it in your physical possession, you're never going to have it. And one of the big problems, though, with that is that, first of all, gold has not kept pace with inflation. It's supposed to, but it's manipulated downward. Gold has risen 35% over a period where inflation is at 75% over a period of those same years. So it isn't keeping pace with inflation, and that's because they purposely manipulate the price of gold downward, and the same with the price of silver. So it hasn't kept pace with inflation. Now, the problem with holding it for last days or real problem tribulation times is that there's no market for gold. Once the grid goes down, there's no market for cryptocurrencies. There's no market. You don't have a bank account because they're all digital now. Unless you have paper records, you can't prove what you've got. And there's no bank employees that are coming to the branch for you to pound on the door and demand your currency. You see, that's the problem. You have to realize the big picture is this World War III that's coming. By the end of this decade with Russia and China, it's going to be preceded by an EMP strike. There's going to be no currency available and no market to trade your gold in for cash.
Well, I think that's
no gold.
That's where I'm coming from. That's my point, Joel, is that we could determine the value of gold so that it would keep pace with inflation if we're determining the value at a local level instead of at a global level or at a national level, which I think was the founders' intent, was to decentralize some of this so it couldn't be manipulated. How could we do something like that in an emergency?
Well, actually, you can't determine the value, because when you want to convince someone that the gold bar that you want to trade with them is worth $3,500 instead of $2,700, they're going to go right to the internet and say, what's the spot price? That's the manipulated price.
Sure.
So you can't convince people to give you more actual value for gold than the spot price is. And the point is, you can't get change for a $2,000 or $2,700 gold coin. I mean, in a hard time situation. When the grid goes down, cash will be king because the people recognize physical cash, and only silver coins, and he's right about that, about official mint silver will have any barter value at all, but it still takes a long time for people to get used to trading in gold and agreeing on the price because nobody's used to doing that. My brother, a wealthy economist, gives away silver dollars as a tip. And more often in big cities, the guy says, what's this, man? They don't even recognize what a silver dollar is, let alone be convinced that it's worth $40. Now, here's my solution. Because we know this war is coming, the globalists want it, the Russians want it, the Chinese want it, you've got to eliminate your future need for money. And that means you've got to stockpile everything that you use. When the electricity goes down, and it's going to be down for a year because we don't stockpile any of the transformers, they're all made in China, you're going to have everything that you use stockpiled. And in order to not get that robbed and stolen as pillaging begins a week after the grid goes down and people come breaking into homes to steal what you've got to have secure storage space in a concealed manner so that they can't get to it. And you're going to have to hide yourself so that you don't want to confront the masses. You're not going to be shooting people because they're starving. You want to have a place to get out of the way and to be safeguarded. What I fear in our conservative movement is that we're placing our hope on Donald Trump. That hope is going to be frustrated because they're never going to let him get reelected. And society is going to continue to go down. When that war comes, we're importing millions of illegals from the worst countries in the world. The Latinos integrate quite well unless they're criminals. But the men from Africa never integrate within society. And they're always going to be in ghettos, and they're going to be released someday when there's no electricity. And it's going to be a very difficult situation. And people need to prepare while we fight for our liberty. You need to prepare for the takedown.
Well, I think
That's
it's always been a communist strategy to release prisoners. I mean, Lenin did this. They released people from the prisons and then they sent those people into other countries. So criminals coming into the United States from the third world and from other countries, absolutely. I think that's part of their plan. That's part of their intent to create chaos and then try to usher in a one world government. We've talked about that before. I want to shift gears just a second to China and North Korea. A couple of moves have happened here in the last 2 weeks. Do you think China is ready to invade Taiwan in the next year, or do you still think it's a couple of years out?
I still think it's a few years out because China isn't ready to take on the West in a nuclear war. Now, they were planning on invading Taiwan 3 years ago until Biden misspoke, saying that we would intervene and try to stop them. Now, heretofore, the State Department always said, we believe in a one China policy. We won't intervene. We don't want you to use force, but we won't intervene. And then Biden said, we will. The White House corrected him. Then he said it again. And now the Chinese are destabilized. They don't know what to think, but they are preparing for the U.S. to intervene. And that means they won't strike Taiwan until they're ready to go to full-scale war with the West, and that won't happen until at least after 2027. Now, North Korea is rattling sabers right now, threatening to invade South Korea, saying the triggers on the artilleries, that can obliterate Seoul. But they've been doing that for years. People put that out as new news. North Korea's always been rattling the saber, but believe me, they are a puppet state of China. They're not going to do anything until China gives the signal, and China won't give that signal until they're ready to take on the West, and I don't think that's going to happen because they're military in full building mode right now, and they're not quite ready. It's not a matter of just numbers of ships. You've got to train people, you've got to have exercises, and they're not ready yet.
Now let's shift over to the Ukraine-Russia war. Do you think that is over here in the next year, or do you think that they continue to drag this out as part of a precursor to World War III?
Well, I think it's going to continue to drag it out. I don't think the Russians in their weakened state, and they're getting stronger because they're in full military rebuilding mode now. But the globalists who want this war know that they can't actually start it. They've got to provoke Russia and China to do so. And that's part of the, things. Now, Russia's not an innocent party. As I've talked about in my World Affairs brief, they faked their own demise in 1989 and 91. They moved the Russian people into Ukraine to have an excuse to reinvade and take back Ukraine on that. Russia doesn't mind a country joining Ukraine. They never purged any of the communists out of Poland and Czechoslovakia and Romania and Hungary, who are all NATO members. That means Russia has many spies within NATO right now. And so Russia is not the good guy that conservatives think. After the war on terror, we attacked all those innocent countries in the name of creating terror, which we created ISIS and we created Al Qaeda. But good people like Ron Paul and Paul Craig Roberts think there are no enemies except our own deep state, and that simply isn't true. Russia faked their own demise. They're still communist. China's still communist. They are going to strike the West when they get ready, but Russia cannot do so now that his conventional military has been, basically undermined through the war on Ukraine. He's got to wait till China's ready, who does have the troops to occupy if you throw a nuclear strike. And that's why all the threats of Putin so far to use nukes have not come to pass. They won't come to pass. And neither will the Middle East create World War III because China doesn't have an interest in the Middle East particularly and can't be drawn into the war. Only Taiwan and the Korea situation will provide a trigger event for China to enter and finally give the go-ahead to strike the West. And it'll happen. It's only going to be a strike on military targets, not cities per se, but it's going to start with an EMP strike and the grid's going to go down and it's going to be very, very bad.
So prepare now. Joel Skousen, thank you so much for joining me on Patriot Radio today. WorldAffairsBrief.com. Really appreciate your perspective.
Thank you very much, Matt.
God bless. Keep up the fight. All right. We're now going to move to your daily intelligence briefing. And coming to us, well, we've got a whole bunch, but coming to us from the globalist front.
The future is built by us. We have the means to make progress on the global agenda.
Yeah, we're going to do that as the new globalist intro. Why? Because it's so creepy. And it should remind us that we need to keep our eyes focused on Jesus Christ. But coming to us from Gateway Pundit, EU globalists consider taking money from Musk's other businesses, including SpaceX and Neuralink, to pay X fines. EU elites furious over Musk's support for free speech. This is what they're going to try to do, is bleed Elon Musk dry, but he seems to be weathering the storm. It's standing for free speech. Now, I don't agree with everything that Elon Musk stands for or does. But at least on X right now, there is some free speech happening. Gab as well. But what really I see is that people get upset at these free speech platforms because they have free speech. It's weird. So weird. That brings us now to the China front. South Korea forces on an island chain off the western coast of the country have reportedly been placed on high alert due to unusual movements being observed from the North Korean shore artillery batteries. This comes on the heels of the North Koreans severing road and rail lines between the two countries. Also, Kim Jong-un designated South Korea as hostile for the first time in history, and apparently it's in their constitution now in North Korea. Like you just heard Joel say, though, doesn't look like it's in the near future. We still have to keep our eyes on it. Also, coming to us from Knightsbridge Research, U.S. General China on dangerous trajectory. General Charles Flynn, outgoing commander of the U.S. Army Pacific, spoke at a conference and said that China's dangerous trajectory could create a global problem. Just to take a look, here is the panoply of Chinese missiles that are in existence, and you can see that they can reach Alaska. Very likely, though, they can reach the West Coast. That's why the buildup in the Pacific continues. Also, China has submitted a mock report regarding the Baltic Connector gas pipeline sabotage on October 8th, 2023. Well, China claimed it was an accident, but Finnish authorities have declared the incident an act of sabotage, convinced that the Chinese vessel, the New Polar Bear, was involved in dragging its anchor across the seabed for 180 kilometers, damaging the pipeline and communication cables because this bears similarities to Chinese operations near Taiwan. It's like the Chinese are branching out with their sabotage operations. Also, let me choose from Sam Faddis. I wonder if this has anything to do with the $33 million the Bidens took from the CCP, question mark. CCP-related espionage cases in 20 states. Well, it's 55 plus, and that's just the very tiny tip of the iceberg. But please notice Washington State high on that list. That brings us now to the Middle East front. Drone footage showing the leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, armed with a stick and hiding behind several chairs just before he was eliminated. Yes, that is correct. The leader of Hamas was eliminated today, along with a couple of other high-ranking Hamas leaders. And oh, what is this? One of his bodyguards was a UNRWA teacher? Black and white, or color in that case. On Sinwar's body, IDF forces discovered a range of items, including an AK-47 rifle, a vest loaded with several grenades, packs of Mentos, of course you got to have fresh breath if you're a terrorist, and a large sum of cash and multiple passports, fake passports, and identification cards. Among the IDs was this bodyguard's ID. The fact of the matter is, it looks like he may have been trying to flee, although another report contradicts that. It looks like he may have been trying to flee because he was caught. Guess where? Bring up the map, please. Right near the Philadelphia corridor. Right near that corridor. Right in Rafah. Right where Biden said everything needed to stop. Probably owes the Israelis an apology. Now, on the good news side, no hostages were found near him. No hostages were harmed. It does beg the question, where are the rest of the hostages if Sinwar was above ground? Also, when asked about Sinwar's death, the Palestinian leader Mahmoud al-Habash responded with, "We wish health to all our people." In other words, well, he lamented the death of the Hamas leader. Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. And Mahmoud Abbas also mourned the loss of Sinwar. Hezbollah, quote, "Under direct orders from the resistance leadership, we are entering a new, intensified phase of confrontation with the Israeli army. Details of this escalation will be revealed in the coming days. It looks like there is going to be increased activity in northern Israel and southern Lebanon here, and perhaps with the Israeli strike on Iran incoming, that this could go far beyond those borders as well, which it really already has. I mean, we should just acknowledge that. Also, Taliban is training terrorists at a former CIA base. Biden-Harris administration did this. Horrendous. They're arming up again. Going to have to deal with terrorism from the Taliban again at some point. Just incredible. All that money. All the lives. Donald Trump, I heard a story about this, and I actually saw it confirmed, where Donald Trump met with one of the leaders over there in Afghanistan. He said, if we withdraw and one hair on the head of a U.S. military person is harmed, that he would kill them. And he threw the guy's house from a satellite view in front of him and walked out of the room. Strong leadership is going to check a lot of this. Good intelligence, revamping our intelligence apparatus to actually go after terrorists, real enemies of this country, is going to solve a lot of this. Also, coming to us from the Russia front. The United Kingdom and the Labour Party have sent staffers to campaign in battleground states in the United States of America. Is this not foreign interference in an election? And who are they campaigning for? Wait for it. Could it be they're campaigning for Kamala Harris? Wonder why that would be. Also, NATO is reviewing Ukraine's victory plan. NATO Chief Mark Rutte said Wednesday that he received details of their proposed victory plan and was discussing those plans with member states. Zelensky is attending a meeting of NATO defense ministers today. NATO leaders have long said that Ukraine cannot join the bloc while the war with Russia is going on. So I don't know if they're going to try to put some kind of peace deal on the table, but it sounds like they may try to do something before the end of the year. Also, Finland and Sweden will initiate a new civil defense campaign on November 18th aimed at preparing citizens for potential crisis, including war. Sweden will distribute 5 million copies of a guide detailing actions to take during a crisis, while Finland will launch a comprehensive website. Okay, kind of headed down the right road. Civil defense. We have to return to civil defense. Decentralized National Guard armories here in the United States in major areas and cities, and also in some rural areas too. We need to go back to that idea of civil defense that President John F. Kennedy proposed and promoted back in the 1960s. It was one of the greatest deterrents to the Soviets. Now that brings us to the national front. I don't know if any of you watched the interview yesterday between Kamala Harris and Bret Baier, but it was an absolute train wreck of an interview. She wouldn't own any of the last 3.5 years, any of it. She wouldn't even own the issues at the border, even though it was their policies that opened the borders because they undid Trump's policies, some of them within 72 hours of Biden taking power. She refused to own any of the atrocities that have occurred inside the United States by some of these illegals and criminals that have come across the southern border. It was very interesting. Now, I am not a fan of Bret Baier, just so we're clear up front. But he did ask some very hard-hitting questions of Harris. And now we get today from Bret Baier, according to Western Journal, that Kamala Harris staffers frantically waved their hands to force him to end the interview. And that the interview was, in fact, cut short by her staff. But also the pressing of Harris on the Middle East. And this is where we really get to it. You have an infiltration of the Biden administration of foreign agents, members of the Muslim Brotherhood. You have Muslim brothers in the White House, all the way up into the National Security Council. You have communist influence in the Biden family that has been documented by a whole bunch of other people. You have all of these outside foreign adversaries that have gone into the heart of the counterintelligence apparatus in the United States of America. So yes, she should have been pressed on this. She should have been pressed on their policies in the Middle East and the fact that the Middle East is on fire right now because of weak leadership in the United States. That Ukraine is on fire right now because of weak leadership in the United States. That the Pacific is on fire right now because of weak leadership in the United States. Yes, she should have been pressed on this. Now, what I saw, though, was she got angry because I think she thinks she's going to lose. I know what Joel said. I'm more of on the place where they will try to not certify the election. They will do what Mike Pence should have done and delay a certification. But they'll actually not certify, which would create not just a constitutional crisis, that could very well lead to an internal issue in the United States of America. Let's just be blunt about that. If the Democrats tried to do that, right, they are intentionally trying to start a conflict inside the United States of America. So, on the other side of this, I see the body language of Mark Zuckerberg during an interview. He looks afraid. I see the backpedaling. I have multiple sources that have been talking about what's going on inside the Democrat camp, that they're in complete disarray, that they're in panic mode. So I think there's some truth to her knowing she's going to lose. I think that there is so much coming against them right now that this is now a very dangerous 2 to 3 week period. Because if they know they're going to lose, if China knows Trump is going to come into power, if Russia knows Trump is going to come into power, if North Korea knows Trump's going to come into power, if the Ayatollah knows Trump is going to come into power, they have every reason to pull something very dramatic. I want you to bookmark this episode, bookmark this time, pull something very dramatic in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Because the thing about communists is they would rather burn the whole house down than lose power. We have to keep that in mind. This is a very, very dangerous time in our country's history right now. That brings us to Ken Paxton doing more great work. His office sued doctor who had illegally provided harmful gender transition treatments for nearly 24 Texas children. Senate Bill 14, a Texas law, took effect in September 2023 and was upheld by the Texas Supreme Court in June 2024, prohibited those transitions. So Texas law directed the Texas Medical Board to revoke his medical license. So we're going to see how this plays out, but this may be a pattern for other states to follow in the future. Also, this just in, by the way, grand jury indicts New Hampshire Supreme Court justice over allegations of case interference. Fascinating headline, but he's been indicted for trying to interfere in an open investigation of her husband. So some corruption being exposed there. And I think we're going to see more of this over the next month or two. More corruption being exposed, more evil being exposed. And the question is there going to be accountability for those people? Are they going to be put in jail? Are they going to be put on trial? You know, we need to ask these questions, and we need to support those who are bringing them to justice. Also, just a really quick, I'm just seeing this right now as we're talking, but just a quick breaking news story. It looks like that the gun that was found on Yahya Sinwar belonged to a Lieutenant Colonel M, a senior officer from the Special Operations Division in the Intelligence Directorate, who was killed during a botched operation in Gaza in 2018. So apparently he kept it as some kind of war trophy. And the Israeli government, Netanyahu specifically, confirming that he was indeed killed yesterday during a strike on the ground there near Rafah. Okay, so what can you do? And if we could pull that up right now, what can you do to prepare for what's coming? Well, one of the things that you can do is check out Verity Metals. A lot of people have been asking me about this in the last 3 weeks. So that's why I wanted to have Matt on the show. I had met him a while ago, but we had just talked recently because I've been getting so many questions about this. And I was asking the question too, you know, is there anybody out there right now who really understands precious metals in that way? And in the way of, hey, what happens if there's an emergency? What about accessibility? What about physical gold? What about doing it in U.S. denominated currency? You know, all of these great questions. And so when I talked to him, he had the whole system set up, and it was a system that, frankly, I'd been actually wanting to see for a very long time. Now, there's others that have done this, and I don't want to take away from them at all. But because so many people have been asking in the last couple of weeks, here's your solution. So what can you do? Check this out. Now, tonight, with your family, as you're praying for the weekend and you're praying over what you're going to be doing, just take that moment today from 1 Corinthians 16, 13 and verses 13 and 14, and just pray through standing firm in your faith and stepping out into an uncomfortable place for the cause of the kingdom. This is Matt Shea. Thank you so much for joining me today on Patriot Radio. May God bless all of you. He is making this generation the greatest one. Keep up the fight.